So good afternoon. I am Ento Budiajo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday to figure out the future for smarter buildings. Panelists are on mondaylive.org in case you wonder who we are. And just to note that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do use the Zoom comment and chat to engage in a conversation. And also a reminder that this slide deck is also available on mondaylive.org. So this being the 2nd of January, it's a bit of a, I think, a slow start for us because it's partly it is a holiday, so many people are not going to be here. But Happy New Year from Monday Live. Yay, we made it through last year. So as we talked about last month, our theme for this month, this whole January, is preparations for the Smarter Summit, which is being held at the AHR on Sunday of AHR. And the agenda, we do our normal chit chat, and then on the Smarter Summit, what we want to do today is talk about the different initiatives that's going on in the industry that's been going on for the past 2-3 years, and try and start to sort of connect those dots, which is really the whole proposition of the summit. So it's a bit of a sort of a run through on that, trying to figure that out. I just put this here just to remind everybody of the summit, the link in case anybody wants it. And before we get on with our conversation, Ken.
Thanks, Ento. I've been actually quite busy over the holiday season. Our latest edition, we were able to talk Keith into joining us as a contributing editor. I'm really pleased to have Keith. He's been with Automated Buildings since Silicon Energy, thank you. Days, that's 1999, anybody that's counting. So I think he has a great perspective, and his bent to move into artificial intelligence right now is, I think, something that we can all kind of follow, and it's good to listen to what he's saying. He's also joined our panel at the AHR education sessions, the one on the digital twins and meta systems. So yeah, really pleased with that. We've basically come up with our theme for 2023, and we're kind of thinking that a part of what we all have to do is just deal with the continue this synthetic data, artificial intelligence, and autonomous systems. They're all falling on us rapidly. Everyone says they have bits and pieces of them. And I think as an industry, I think our task is to try and keep that real. And I think this group has a great play in that. So I'm looking forward to a lot of text. We're extremely pleased with our reinvention. It's going well. It's actually almost turning out as I imagined and hoped, that the industry would take over and start expressing their views rapidly. The thing, I think the secret of our reinvention is the timing, the fact that we can actually get information out within days rather than having to wait months. It does seem to make it work better with social media. So I'm quite pleased with that. We're also pleased to be part of the Smarter Summit. Looking forward to helping create that today. And a lot of our speakers are the same speakers that are going to be there. So it's going to be a chance for them to give a little bit of a tip of what they're going to talk about in their sessions in the next 2 days, the following 2 days after the summit. Back to you, Ento.
Thank you, Ken. I'm clicking and it didn't move. That's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. What's going on? I'm having technology problems here today. Yeah, so a couple of things. One is found this interesting article in Forbes about what to expect in next year. What I thought was interesting was that it obviously lists the obvious things like recession and inflation and stuff, but it also lists some other non-obvious things like risk, damage to reputation, inability to reach target audiences. These are kind of more broader things. And something I didn't expect here was mental health issues in the workplace. Right. So a lot of things that sort of that's going on in this world is kind of interesting to see that being captured by Forbes as being things that we should be concerned about. And the other piece is this article that I found, which is written by an AI robot about AI in cybersecurity. So it's kind of recursively kind of intriguing. It's kind of, the article itself wasn't that interesting, but just the fact that it was written, I think this is kind of one of the trends that we're seeing that Ken was mentioning. AI is becoming real. Ken, you were talking about Keith Gibson. I was actually speaking with him the last couple of weeks, and he was talking about how he's building an AI platform, which is very interesting, but he was telling me last week that he's using ChatGPT, he's using AI to help him build the AI system. So again, it's kind of like we're getting into a new world here, and this time period seems to be, the sort of the trigger point or the point of change. So that's kind of what was interesting. Any other thoughts before we move on from anyone?
Did you guys see the guy who got put on leave at Google because he told Google that they need to handle this particular sentient being differently and more kindly? So they sent him home on paid leave.
Yeah. All right. So Smarter Summit preparations. And so the way we're kind of looking at this is that we're at base camp and we're headed to the summit in Atlanta. So we're, as you would do if you were climbing the summit, you gather at base camp, you get all your resources together, you plan things out and make sure you have all things in order before you go to the summit. So that's basically what we're doing in January. I've always wanted to go to the base camp of Everest, and this is the closest I'm going to get. So that's about it. And so the way we're going to have this conversation today, and also at the summit, is referring back to one thing that the Coalition for Smarter Buildings did about 2 years ago, which is to create these 5 pillars of action that you see listed there: interoperability, analytics, specification, procurement, and workforce. So the coalition, with the help of Monday Live, sort of came up with these as being the 5 things that the industry should be focused on to be able to better serve the market. And the conversation we're going to have today is really around this. For each one of those 5 pillars, we've identified a number of different initiatives or things or open source projects or other things that's happened over the past 3 years, really. So this is going back to the last proper AHR, which is back in Orlando in 2020. And so the first one there is the Smarter Stack. That's something that this group obviously created. Somebody want to speak to that? Mark or Tracy, I know you've both used it in presentations. Just speak to really the role of the Smarter Stack and
I can start. So that was a concept I think we came up with pretty early on in this whole process of meeting. And it was kind of the result of us needing a way to envision how all the various elements and stakeholders and so forth in the industry come together and how they, maybe more importantly, interact. And what's the place of a system, what's the place of the end user in all of this and pulling this together. So it's a model created just to sort of define our ecosystem, if you will.
And I'll add, to me, it's that and more. Look at it as a framework for creating a smarter building. In other words, the elements that are the main areas that we identify, the main subject areas, from connectivity to the type of facility to data analytics, whatever. If one goes through that and truly answers those subject areas with respect to a building or a group of buildings, you have essentially a roadmap, which I think, we've got awesome technology in our industry. And I've been having a discussion with a colleague of mine from another company. And at this point, do we have too much technology? And that's something we've been having some private conversations with. I don't want to get into it today, but this smarter stack, if one really looks at it and goes through that as a process, the end result is a really good roadmap, a good framework for creating a smarter building. And again, I think there's the difference here, creating a smart building and one that is smarter.
Yeah, cool. That's why we called it the Smarter Stack. So next item is the independent data layer, which is clearly part of the Smarter Stack. It obviously sits in the data layer. Jim, you want to talk about that?
Well, I think that if you're looking at trying to get interoperability amongst applications, one of the big problems we have is standardization of the data as it comes up below. The idea of an independent data layer is to set a base level, least common denominator of standards that allow data coming up to be used by many different applications.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting watching that discussion. A lot of that has been discussed in Nexus Pro with James Dice. So interesting sort of layering of technology. API first product development. Rick, do you want to chime in on that? I know you've been very passionate about that.
Well, it's great to see that the concept of API first, or companies that can provide a component to a larger solution, is starting to take hold. And we've got quite a few great examples in our industry now as well. But the concept may have started in more of the IT space, of where a component, somebody creates a really cool component that doesn't by itself do much, or if anything, but it depends on some other part of a stack for pieces to be composed and brought together to provide value. And it's just exciting to see that concept is working, because we can't move as fast or as nimble, or if everything is tightly coupled. But if things are loosely coupled with really good APIs, and people see that they can add value and make a business out of a product that just serves part of the stack, that's exciting for going forward.
Which is how the internet works, by the way. Semantic tagging, who wants to speak to that a little bit? A lot has happened both in Haystack, Brick, and the 223 project. Jim, you're probably as close to that as any of us on screen.
Sure, I think it's really important, going with the independent data layer and things we talked about. One of the foundations is metadata, and agreeing on metadata for many different applications. So in fact, if you look at raw building automation data, sub-metering data, it's really pretty useless without understanding the context that goes around it. But standardization of how we represent that context is very important. As Anto mentioned, there are many different people trying to standardize that. Haystack has been out in front and has done a lot of practical work. There's some other theoretical work that's coming up. But it's really important, because without that, we can't really make a lot of value of the huge amount of information that's out there collected for us today.
You know, and let me just add, you know, if you look at the IDL, the independent data layer, and semantic tagging, I think this is all part of the progression that we as an industry are looking at data. In other words, we've for years talked about the importance of data. And again, it's one thing to be able to connect to get data, and it's another thing to be able to apply applications on top of that to do your analytics and stuff. But I think, you know, this is all part of the journey. So we are really extending the value of data by now looking at this IDL, enhancing the semantic tagging and all that. So I, for one, I'm glad to see that the industry is moving in that direction with respect to data.
Cool. A lot of stuff going on. Next one's connection profiles. I'll take that. That's a new technology. It's a upcoming technology that is really sort of designed to use metadata, standardized metadata on how systems connect to each other. The premise of connection profiles is that you have all of these layered composable pieces that's presented in a smarter stack. How do you easily connect them with each other without each one being an engineering project, right? So that's the vision of the vision of connection profile, and happy to see that that's is evolving over the past couple of years. Next one's an explosion of IoT offerings from all manner of vendors. I'm not quite sure who wants to. Maybe that's your thing, Tracy.
Yeah, I'll take that one. And it's kind of interesting. When we look at traditional controls in buildings and how we've sort of always envisioned how systems come about and how they're designed and implemented, as compared to what I would call an IoT view of systems, which tends to care a whole lot less about what happened in the past and a whole lot less about what else is out there in the building for systems. They tend to be little islands of automation, but are rapidly becoming the way that a lot of systems are finding their way into buildings these days. So we've talked a lot as a group here about how do we sort of take an IoT mentality to building controls going forward, and you know, allow a place, if you will, in our world of controls for new innovative IoT offerings that are coming out, and they're just all over the map right now, and they really create probably the biggest challenge when it comes to user interface unity, if you will, and a little bit of integration there, I guess, underneath that. But it's going to be interesting to see how all these come together and what that looks like going forward.
And I think that, go ahead, Ken.
The last bullet item here is really it's just a way to look at all of these things that is on the smarter stack, and to look at them as system of systems, which is very different to a system. A system's engineered to do something specific, but a system of systems is really a mechanism that allows change and dynamics to occur. And if you think of buildings as being something that needs to operate over decades, there is definitely a lot of dynamics in buildings over those decades. So thinking about everything as system of systems is really sort of an interesting way of actually simplifying the making things interoperable.
I wouldn't mind. So, Anto, I wouldn't mind touching. Go back one. I wouldn't mind touching a little bit on the explosion of IoT offerings. To me, the key word there is explosion. It's almost it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, the explosion, it starts to teach us and socialize us on what is possible out there. And your customers also like, oh, wait, can I do this? Can I do that? Because I'm hearing about it on my Instagram feed. On the other hand, it sort of starts to weaken some of those earlier bullet points and starts to, I don't know, we're seeing for sure this siloing of data like Tracy referred to. So it's a double-edged sword for sure. And I guess if you're a CEO and you don't create a cloud-based solution, an IoT solution, the board would probably ask you what the heck you were doing. So we understand why they're out there, but not sure how much use they're all getting these days. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And if you, to add to that, if you kind of look at this from all angles, question I keep seeing is, has all of this effort in the IoT space been successful? And what percentage of the IoT initiatives actually have been successful, which is ones that have not been successful? So I don't have the answer. I'm just, again, kind of where to add to what you're saying, Bill.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Anto, if the intent is to think about this from the point of view of the summit. So the concept of a summit is getting up to the 50,000 foot view and out of the weeds and see the broader theme. What is the current status as this group sees it of interoperability? Is it moving towards more interoperable? Is it moving towards more siloed with cybersecurity, IoT, and things like that? What is the current situation? And to Tracy's point a couple of weeks ago, what is the desired outcome? How would we do interactive polling at the summit to find out what people think? How would we put our ideas out there to suggest where we think it is right now? Just looking at it from a bigger theme.
I think that's a really, really interesting question. Good point. And I think that's why we're doing this. On the subject of interoperability, I think the state of play, and the other way to think about the summit as a sort of a state of the union kind of thing. The state of interoperability is that there are these tools that are being created by us, by the industry, to make interoperability easier to do, more predictable, more scalable, and more commercially doable. So I think we're definitely not there, and we're definitely not where we were 3 years ago when interoperability was maybe not looked at this way. So that's how I would respond to that.
Well, if we were going to do a Mark Peacock style 5-second answer, yes or no, or interoperable or less interoperable, like he's done with panels, what would this group say is the current trend? What are you seeing more of? Getting more interoperable or less?
We're seeing at the systems integrator, they understand interoperability, but they're being sold to by this explosion of IoT offerings. So they understand it and they're confused.
I think the danger here is this is where most of the innovation is coming from in our world. And a lot of the innovators don't have the history or insight or experience to understand the importance of interoperability with other people's systems. So they care a lot less from an innovation side of things. But those of us who've been doing this for a while care a lot more and understand the importance of getting it right from the beginning here. So interoperability is necessary. And I would bet that most of the people who have IoT platforms will say, oh, I'm completely interoperable. I have a cloud API. You can do anything you want with it, right? And so that's their vision of interoperability is a cloud to cloud API sort of integration or interoperability as opposed to a native interoperability at the data layer.
I'll throw this in that I believe we are just at the cusp of interoperability and we're moving it. And it's just not some of us in the industry who were talking about it, but where I see a lot of it being driven is at the building owner operator level as well, because of the new business challenges that they are forced that they have to deal with, is that interoperability is a key to helping solve those business challenges that they have to face. And we've all talked about the importance of outcomes. So it's just not our industry. I think we are responding to interoperability. We've been doing integration for years. We've been doing connectivity for years. We've been doing all of that. And as an industry, we've talked about interoperability, but it's kind of been way out there on that fringe. But today it's come front and center, in my opinion.
So Rick, you're dying to say something and then we need to move on. Rick?
Yeah, the word explosion, I'm not sure if you chose that intentionally, but it can mean a couple of different things. And if we actually show these IoT folks how to fit into our smarter stack and into our architectures, and if we learn a little bit from them, just breaking up their silo a little bit and showing how it can be compatible, that's what we're doing with the smarter stack and with other examples of these other tools that are going to help them accomplish interoperability. You can't blame these IoT guys for not being interoperable if we haven't given them the roadmap.
All right, let's move on to the next pillar, which is analytics. Jim, you probably should take most of these. You want to start?
Sure. I think that from a high level, first bullet says FDD is a mainstream offering. I think it absolutely is right now. There are many different vendors offering a product. If you look further down, the Division 25 group, John Petsy and I wrote an open specification, which we've been circulating. I think that analytics have arrived. The problem is it's still an adoption problem and a business problem that we've talked about, that people don't know how to pay for analytics over a longer term, over an operating cycle. So although the technology is very available and very powerful and has a long track record of providing value, people are still experimenting with business models as to how to get it out there. So,
Jim, how about this? Is that I agree with you, but I also think there's not enough people in our industry who understand analytics. In other words, if I take your solution as an example or any others, and I go, great, I'm an owner operator. This is great. Love it. I want to apply analytics. I don't feel there is enough people at the owner operator level who truly understand, can comprehend the FDD as an example, or other analytic pieces and parts of an overall analytic initiative for a building.
I think you're absolutely right, Mark. I mean, that is a gaping hole, but it's one that has been really tough to close and change. One of the problems we've had is generational turnover in that customer base, especially of these operating people. So what we found is a lot of the people that didn't want to take the time to learn what FDD was all about are retiring. And there's a new wave of younger people that are coming in that have somewhat more open minds to it. But once again, is their ability to articulate the value proposition to upper management strong enough to actually get it in there? So, but I think there is a lack of knowledge, but without people getting in and getting their feet wet and trying it, I don't know how we cross that chasm other than time and experience.
I feel like it's the Henry Ford problem, right? If I ask my customers what they want, they would say a faster horse.
Right.
Right. And it's very much the same here. I think that customers don't know what to ask for exactly. We've got this powerful new technology, and we haven't found the killer app that will really kind of convert customers at this point for it. So lots of great insight in moving forward, but no killer app.
Tracy, I'm going to use a different analogy. I'm going to say analytics is the new cybersecurity. Here's what I mean. People know they got to do it. They don't friggin' know how, so they just whistle past the graveyard and don't touch it. Like that's that's where I'm going to say. But eventually it's going to be everywhere. But we're not, well, Jim's been there for 30 years, but we're not quite there. It's the new cybersecurity.
Right. So a lot of what's happened that's listed on this slide is related to ESG and carbon and also grid enablement. And anybody want to speak to that?
Yeah, those are all there because we're hoping they're going to be drivers to get us to cross that chasm. But one of the things that we've talked about in this program with some regularity is that when one introduces a discontinuous technology, it needs an order of magnitude improvement to get adopted quickly. And I would say that we do have a lot of killer apps. The only problem is those killer apps have 30% returns, not 100% or 10 times returns. And because of that, it's going to make crossing that chasm slower and harder. And I'm not sure I can deliver that order of magnitude with what the technology has to offer. I think it's very worthwhile. I think it's great. I think it's proven. Ain't got a factor of 10 for you.
Let me ask a question. Does it feel like to anyone else, if you dial the clock back to the days of what we called M2M, right? Machine to machine. And that seemed a little faddish. Everyone knew it was a thing, it was coming, but the name didn't stick. And now it's IoT, right? It just feels like it's going through some kind of evolution process here for everyone to get on the same page.
Are you talking about analytics being that, or?
Yeah. Yeah, and ESG applied to that is another name that's trying to be the catch-all for all of these things that we've been talking about, right?
Right. Yeah, I have to say, I'm talking to systems integrators, small, local / regional. The big guys are already there, but the small regional guys are going, yeah, we want to put N4 in the cloud. And then we want to do some analytics after that too. We're talking to code, we're talking to ClockWorks, whatever. So my gut is, your kind of average Joe SI, I knows it's right there. I mean, I know Jim must know part of the average Joe. Just messing with you, Jimmy. But I'm hearing, yeah, and we're going to get into some analytics. We're hearing. So that's just a little gut feeling from my day-to-day calendar.
So we kind of, I'm trying to step the pace up here a little bit. We talked quite a bit about AI in our news and trends. So maybe I'll throw this back at you, Melissa, asking the question, listening to all this, where do you think we are here? Are we making progress? Is this on this topic?
Well, it's really interesting because I still think that there is tremendous opportunity to connect how analytics help save people time. Right now, there are over 15,000 jobs that have been posted as vacancies in either government positions or commercial positions at low levels of the building owner and systems integrator level. These people could benefit significantly from analytics as a way to optimize how they use their time. So I think that some of it may be messaging, Some of it may be, the same old things that we've known for a long time, but we do know that we have analytics now embedded in curriculum for workforce in 4 different learning paths. So thanks to the people on this call today, starting in 2023 will be the first year that our curriculum will actually include education on what fault diagnostics is and why it's important and how it can save you time and money and those kinds of things. So we'll see if it does some good.
Great. Thank you. So the next pillar is specification. I think this is probably the most interesting to me because of the Div 2525 project. Rick, you're probably the best to speak to what's going on there.
Yeah, again, from the standpoint of what we kind of set out to do started 2 years ago with the coalition, there was this feeling that we needed to give a place for where do people describe the fact that they want a smart building. What document do you use? What standardized way of accomplishing a project that has the aspects of smart building in it? How and where do you get that done? And with the Smarter Stack sitting right there, and then this tried and true process of how the construction world, how renovations, how all things happen in real estate. It was this great opportunity to use the master format specification process and divisions to plug in some framework and some explanation of here's how you describe the different parts of interoperability using a standard and accepted approach to the design and delivery of a project. And the Division 25 and the whole master format concept is a little bit foreign to some folks in our industry, but it's been really fun to see how many people came together, people with a background in using the divisions, people without a background in using it, to realize that this is a great opportunity to put a framework together, suggestions, numbering guides, some details and some examples of here's where somebody describes, I want a smart building, and here's the pieces that the different vendors and the different contractors need to assure happens. So that work has been great. And again, from my standpoint, the community of contractors and owners and vendors and engineers, they need to have it put into their language, and their language using master format to describe things is working out. It's getting great feedback. Great, thank you. There's lots of other sort of items on this. Anybody want to chime in on any of them?
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is that the new cybersecurity program that launches this month has a whole quarter on cybersecure specifications and really introduces a pretty deep dive on how those standards, guidelines, and specs are driving what's happening in the industry. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out now that that is a part of the accredited curriculum.
Jim, do you want to chime in on the manufacturer's guide?
Yeah, I think that while all of these other things have been going on, manufacturers have gotten together to figure out a roadmap, a pathway, and a number of guidelines, if you will, to develop their products to prepare for a cybersecure future, with the benefit of developing zero trust cybersecurity down to the end node. Quite a lot of work's gone on there, and people are beginning to put it in products. And I think in a couple of years, the products will be out there. But the guide has been published, and it's hopefully will soon be published by ASHRAE as well.
The last item there, CNSCP. CNS is the system name for that manages connection profile. So there is a specification that's been created. It's on GitHub. And the purpose of putting it there, creating the specification, is for it to be picked up by a standard organization that we're working on that front for it to be a standard. So that's obviously an ongoing piece of work. So I think a lot has happened on this front, Melissa, as a sort of a State of the Union thing. You agree with that?
I do. Sorry, I had myself stuck on mute. I do. I do think it's interesting to get other people's opinions on this, you know, to kind of step out of our isolated ideas of what we think, and maybe at the summit, we can use some of the interactive polling techniques that we had to get audiences to weigh in. It could be cool.
Go.
Melissa, I'll tell you what, Melissa, the value she's already bringing, she will hold this group accountable to moving this thing forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. So next is procurement. This has been Jim's sort of main point of passion, call it that. But I'm going to ask Rick to just speak about that first bullet point about the sort of that what seems to be a new way building owners are thinking about procuring, not just for construction, but for construction and operation, which is the whole thing that we've been talking about for the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, I think it comes down to there's more understanding of life cycle cost and total cost of ownership, total cost of operations than what maybe we give owners have given owners credit for. We just need to help them with that evaluation process. And we are also seeing procurements and procurement structures that are taking into consideration life cycle cost or ongoing costs, and putting the cost of a project over 15 years, and not just include recurring licensing costs, but what are my cost of operations going to be? How are they going to be affected by this new technology? And, you know, perhaps again, this started in the IT world, where the concept of seat licenses started, where people don't buy a computer anymore. They buy a license for a certain number of years, and it comes with all this capability. And so, you know, yeah, the construction world and the design and engineering worlds are all kind of still stuck in design bid build or design build, but there's more outcome-based contracting that we're seeing, and we can do our part as vendors to help understand and put things in that 15 or 20 or 30 year context, and help put it out there, because the owners are more aware than ever about the bad that comes from just thinking about first cost, because building immediately becomes a liability for maintenance, a liability for risk, a liability for ongoing costs, and they want to understand what those things are. So again, I think over this next cycle, the coalition is going to sort of not pivot, but put a more intense focus on procurement. I almost said reform, but that's not really it. It's more highlighting the different ways that procurement can happen in a more outcome-based fashion.
And Jim, we also now have this BCS risk management framework. I'm not sure if that's officially what it's called, but that should help the procurement process on the cyber side.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are a number of efforts rolling forward, but when we go down to people that are not necessarily forward-looking customers, I still feel like there is a lack of education or a lack of understanding in that traditional process that Rick talked about, which is what I still see most of the time. I'm certainly aware that there are some cutting-edge people there, but I think we need to do a lot more education to get this to move along. And while I think that people are aware of the life cycle operating cost components, I think that it's easy for them to fall back into their old practices, because very few people in the ecosystem have enough power to change the way that business has been done. And that includes procurement in large organizations. So for instance, a university, it's a different group at the university still that decides to build the building than the one that operates it. And until we begin to blur those lines at a very high level, where people at a high level take that seriously, it's hard to change.
And so, I was going to say, with respect to life cycle costs and all that, all of this is, in my opinion, great stuff. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think, as I see it, is and I'm hoping that all these initiatives that we've been doing, Monday Live, the coalition, and Melissa on her end for et cetera, and whatever, is that it all comes down to, in my opinion, how is any of this stuff or all of it contributing to the value of the building itself? Put yourself as a commercial real estate owner, whether you are a REIT, whether you're a corporate owner, it comes down to the value of that piece of property or that facility. And unless we take all of the stuff we're doing it and then bring in the value and the impact that all of this stuff is being done to making that building much more valuable than it was if you don't do it or you don't implement some of the things, then I think we're not going to get there as an industry. We will not get there.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that's really about how all of these things come together and to be expressed as satisfying some objectives that people have. So there's no question about that. But we just sort of focused on the bits of it, the dots, as it were.
Yeah, but ultimately, with all of these initiatives we're doing, we've got to offer proof points. In other words, prove it to me. If I'm a building owner, prove it to me that implementing all this great cybersecurity stuff, as an example, or analytics, all this stuff, what impact, what's the true value that I get from this building, and show me.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
It's about the hole, right, Mark? Drill.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Moving on to the last pillar, which is workforce. Let Melissa run with most of this.
Well, it'd be great to engage the audience on this. I spend my entire week on these topics, but there's a lot of good stuff happening. I think the overall theme is that there are many positive, excellent initiatives happening throughout the industry because workforce is such an important topic. I think I mentioned on one of these shows a couple of months ago that I went to Rockwell Automation's automation fair this year, and in the industrial world, it was astonishing how many of their new product launches and how many of their product offerings had the heading of how it impacted workforce, how many man hours it was saving, how many, what kinds of impacts the technology was having, rather than it having a focus strictly on the interesting features and benefits of the technology itself. So I think the fact that workforce is going to continue to be an issue means that there's a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate across the industry. I'd love to hear from this group of what your questions are. What are your curiosities about the things that you see up here and what's happening today?
Everybody's silent. Heck, you know me. I'll just
be silent.
I won't. I'll just dive in. So I think all of this is absolutely wonderful. We are advancing, we are advancing with this, but ultimately, I think we still, as an industry, suffer from a lack, I should say, from a perception issue. I still think people who we want to bring in, engage in these great programs, is that they still look at managing and operating a building as a certain stereotype that exists. And we are still facing that battle, in my opinion, to get other people to say, oh, wow, this is pretty cool stuff. I'm going to go and, become I'm going to operate buildings and stuff like that with all this great technology. So
we have a PR.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I just said we have a PR gap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some companies don't. And I just want to point that out. There's a lot of companies in this space that are not having any trouble getting people excited to come work for them at all.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Rick, is that there are definitely best practices. We're seeing very high enthusiasm rates. We're getting very strong applications in certain sectors. And it really does come down to messaging and how you message and how you're selling it. At the end of the day, we've got 3 problems related to workforce in this industry. We're aging out and retiring. We have, the average age of our industry is 58 years old, and we're going to lose a third of our workforce by the time we hit 2025. That is a significant succession planning issue. The second issue is that we have got overworked middle layer of people that are so strapped with the work that they're doing now. It's very difficult to open up a space to learn things new, like cybersecurity, like what to do with the explosion of IoT and all of those other things that are confusing. And the only way we're going to fix that middle layer that needs to be able to upskill is by attracting more people to this industry. I would love to hear you guys guess what the average age is right now of people that are coming into the industry from outside the industry right now. What would you guess the average age is? We've got really good analytics on this.
35.
Yeah, you know, because you've seen some of our reports, but it's in that 35 to 40 range. They're career changers. We're not appealing to young people. The numbers that we have the lowest numbers on are those young populations, which is why Stacks and Jewels is so significant and why we're so excited about what they're doing, because that is a high school program. It is appealing to that younger generation where we're not doing very well. The other area where we are not making as much traction on is right now across all sectors of our industry, only about 3% of our entering workforce are women. And until we resolve the appeal to women, we're not going to make big scalable traction in attracting new people to the industry. That is a prerequisite.
So Melissa, how do we get the 150,000 people who've been laid off in big tech companies?
Excellent. Love it.
All right.
Love
so we don't have the time to go into that.
No, but I can say one thing, Anto, and it's worth answering, is that that's what ASP's work is all about. The work that ASP is doing is building those connections with state and federal programs and with employers that are offboarding and trying to direct them to people that need to onboard. There's a lot of activity going on in that area as we speak. So that's a great, but it's still going to be career changers, Mark. It still doesn't fix the fact that we have, exactly as Bill said, a serious messaging problem in that younger than 25 age group.
Perception. Bingo.
So other cross-cutting issues which didn't sort of line up with the 5 pillars are these. I think ESG, we already talked about that. I think there's an increased awareness and prioritization of it. Cybersecurity awareness is increasing, though not near anything enough. There's a lot of community building. Obviously, this group is a community being built. The CEO coalition is big, the big network around the country also. The next one I actually find is interesting because there's been a lot of people excited about smart cities, and it's kind of gone up and down, and right now it's in a bit of a doldrums. But the realization that a smart city is really nothing but a collection of buildings with a whole bunch of infrastructure. I know I'm oversimplifying it, and smart cities expert would probably shoot me or something. But that's
collection of buildings, and it's a collection of pumping stations and all that. They're already doing it, they just haven't brought it together.
Yeah, exactly, which is what the smart city is. And some interesting stuff going on with the coalition on showcases. So a lot of really good stuff. We're out of time. So Melissa, you're kind of looking at this from a process and how people are sort of how the industry is changing. How would you sum up what we've talked about here and what we need to talk about in terms of structuring the conversation at the summit?
Well, I think it would be very useful for us to think about Tracy's question before the holidays is, you know, what would we hope the outcome of us having done the summit be? And if you look at these cross-cutting issues, it may be an opportunity to look at high-level summary points, trending directions, or even things like I love the comment, I don't remember who made it, but in interoperability, that innovation is driving a lot of the direction of interoperability. And I think, Rick, you said that it's up to us to embrace these young innovators or these new entrants to the market and inspire them to understand the value to them for interoperability. So I think if maybe we took one theme kind of like that of what we would like to see happen with each of the pillars, and maybe use the cross-cutting activities as a way to derive that, it could get out of the weeds and up to the height of the summit there.
Or okay, it's beautiful. Or get out of just pure concept and down to a little bit more practical level. So however you want to look at it, but
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, you know, people have to be able to wrap their mind around things, and they have an attention budget. And if we can give them something that would give them an emotional appeal that benefits them in some way for each of the topics that we hope they think about when they leave, that might get some traction.
Cool, that's great. So thank you, Melissa, and thanks everyone else. And I think this has been a good first conversation of the year anyway, and we're going to continue this over the course of January. Let's bring this to a wrap. We'll be back next Monday. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all that are not working that joined us today. Again, hoping everybody has a great and safe and kind 2013.
Whoa!
How about 23?
23.
23.
You've been
You're
drinking.
still writing 13 on your check, Santa?
Yeah, but most people only lost 2 years to COVID. It sounds like you lost a decade there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See y'all. Bye.